Hello there, and welcome to Pink Milk, where we serve Star Wars queerly. Today is someday, and someday we're talking about the rainbow capitalism of it all. Are you with me? Let's get into this thing and drink up.
I love you.
I know you. Can I buy you a drink?
Every time walks both worlds.
Before we die, I want you to know.
We can bring all tribes together.
Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Pink Milk. If you are new here, hello. If you're returning here, hello. I'm your host, Bryan. Normally, my husband, Tom, is here with me. However, he's out raising our children while I am here hanging out with you and our friend Jake for part 2 of my sit-down one-on-one convo with him. Last week, we spoke a lot about being a writer at Lucasfilm and what it was like to work on films and getting a real peek behind the curtain of what it's like to work on a Star Wars. However, today, we're going to talk more about what it's like being gay, out in the world, shopping rainbow capitalism, problems with people in the world, the great things with people in the world. We talk some more Star Wars. Anyways, it's a longer episode, so I'm going to let you go and get listening to this great conversation. And I'll talk to you as soon as it's over. Bye! I'm glad you brought up the Acolyte. And one of my favorite parts of Acolyte, honestly, is that there is an S-ton of queer people behind it.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
excited for different voices.
Leslie Headland was very adamant about having someone on the trans spectrum be the lead. I remember, again, so early days when it was still very much just in that development phase. I remember that being a big deal for her.
Yep.
And it's so necessary, especially now. But we do need more queer representation, particularly in Star Wars. You know, I have to. I was part of a employee resource group when I was working at Lucasfilm, and one of the things that we would do is kind of talk with each other about different opportunities for queerness and how to push different for how the company is going to celebrate Pride Month. We would all get really involved, and one of the things that we were able to do was kind of talk as a group with some of the upper executives about things we were disappointed in and opportunities for going forward. And one of the things that one of the conversations we were able to have was with Kathleen Kennedy and Michelle Rejwan and all of those people. And while some people, again, Rise of Skywalker was very fresh for all of us. So some people were bringing up the kind of the Storm pilot Finn and Poe stuff, which I can talk to more in a second. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I wanted to bring up with them, and I was able to have a conversation with Kathleen Kennedy and Michelle Rejwan about it, was the baiting that there would be queer representation, and then it's a kiss between two characters who do have names technically: Resistance Commander Larma Darcy and Resistance Pilot Worobi Tice. Hope I'm pronouncing those correctly, because we've never heard their names on screen. Larma Darcy has more lines in Last Jedi than she has in Rise of Skywalker. And they are never on screen together except for their kiss. There are other scenes that they're both in, the Resistance planning things or talking about stuff, but it's they are on opposite sides of whatever meeting and things like that. And just of how that is tokenism. That is hurtful in its own way. And
I oftentimes joke, I call it the shut up kiss, because shut up gays, you got it. And I still feel that the two gay porgs nuzzling up against one another in The Last Jedi are more accurate and is more beautiful representation than the shut up kiss. Because it wasn't asked for, no one brought attention to it. Okay, they're not humans, they're birds, whatever. They're still gay, and I'm here for it. But
Yeah.
like the let's blast off how there's gonna be queer rep in this, and then that's what you gave us. You know, if you had said nothing, I think that would have been applauded.
Yeah, and I made that point to them because it's
Yep.
like it was said of like how they were really struggling with how to do it, and with, you know, frankly, that wasn't the story that the writer directors were looking to tell so much. So they were looking at how they could fit something in and didn't really understand the. Because I don't think there's as much of a conversation broadly. Like, yes, in queer spaces, on Twitter, on
Mhm.
things like that, we talk about tokenism in regards to the queer community. But as far as like a national conversation goes, that isn't really there, you know. Um, eh, Thinking about like friends I went to high school with, when they hear tokenism, they are only going to be thinking in terms of people of color.
Yep.
And even then, probably more specifically Black people, and not even thinking about Asian representation or other communities and how tokenism affects them. There is a lot more work there that needs to be done. And I think a lot of it is also, I don't think it was so much of a shut up gaze as it was I think it was an honest and earnest attempt,
Yeah.
but it was misguided because they didn't have that experience and they didn't know how unseen certain people feel. And I think there's a lot of things like that of, you know, I know of another example where, the creatives were like, with the possibility of queerness for a character, they were like, we understand that it would be important to tell that story, but we don't feel like we're the right people to tell that story. And in all honesty, I agree. They aren't the right people, but they are the
Yep.
people that could tell a queer story. And
Yep.
that's the tough thing, is it's like when you are in a creative in this space, in these big franchises that have so much noise being shouted back at you, you are going to be shouted at of whether or not you were the right person to tell a queer story, whether you told a queer story well versus whether you told one at all.
Mhm.
And it's it's tough because it's like, yeah, we need to demand better, but we also have to dial back some of the vitriol and be like, okay, we understand you tried. Here's why that didn't work and what we need to do better going forward.
Mhm.
And that is part of what makes Leslie Headland so exciting. Is it's like, here is a queer woman coming forward and being very deliberate about making sure there is queerness on the screen.
Yep.
And I don't know about the character, but I do know that like having a non-binary lead, someone in the trans spectrum, was so important to her. I know that was back and forth talks for like literal years before it was announced.
Yep.
So that's what we need more of, and we need more of that in other spaces, in other parts of the franchise, not just this one show that's over here. And I do think there are other things in development that, like in the big Disney shareholder announcement video from 2020, when
Mhm.
Rogue Squadron was announced, and whether or not that's still happening, who knows. And like some of these other shows were announced, um, I don't know if you remember, there were parts that cut out and only
Mhm.
investors got to see. It's like there were a couple other shows that would have some queerness, that were in development, that were talked about there, and I can't say what they were.
Yeah.
um, and also the pitch reel for Lando looked amazing. Really hope Justin Simeon's able to come back
Mhm.
and do that. I know there's a lot of scheduling conflicts and a lot of things, but the direction he wants to go, because a pitch reel is just like a reel of clips and audio to kind of give a mood for like the vibe.
Yep.
And it was one of the most exciting things I've seen. Really hope the Lando show eventually comes to fruition.
Yeah.
That I think I think Star Wars fans will be really excited if it ever is able to see the light of day.
That's
I don't
great.
know.
That's
It may
great.
not, because he's busy. Um, you know, Glover's busy. Like everyone's busy.
Well, hey,
So
look, Mr. Glover's talking about it again. Look how long we had to wait for Mr. McGregor to but he kept it up and he kept it alive and he kept it going
yeah.
and we eventually got it.
Well, and I think again, it's part of what's exciting about that is whether or not they lean into the queerness of Lando. Justin Simeon is a queer man himself,
Yep.
and that's exciting.
Mhm.
I don't, having queer people tell stories is not the same as telling queer stories. And I
Yep.
think, though, queer people telling stories without queer characters is still so important and still changes the way that we tell our stories
Yeah.
and what we are allowed to get from them.
Can I ask you a question that is
Sure.
not one of our pre-designed questions?
I feel
But
like I've kind of gone off the rails
oh
on
no,
those
this is
pre-designed
no, this is so
questions.
perfect. Thank you. Let me. This is not a popular Twitter question. I'm sure, and I know. I'm just going to ask this question. Here we go. It's not a popular Twitter question, but you mentioned two things that I want to circle back to. I think it's important, and I say a shut up kiss, and I do feel that way. And I'm sure that it was well intentioned. I am a person who sees the glass half full kind of person, and I know there were not like back there saying "shut up, gays," but it still felt that way to me. And it wasn't the kiss itself; it was the let's market this, just like let's make Green Lantern gay, but he's going to be Green Lantern from some universe that no one cares about, and he's going to be in the background of a panel or whatever like that. Like, look, if you're going to do that, I think that's amazing and that's wonderful. Give us something. I think there are ways to give us queer coding and things, and I know queer coding isn't enough. But for me, in a thing like Star Wars specifically, that so much is left untold, and to me, I say there's so much of a mass that we can put ourselves in. I think leaving ambiguity is actually incredibly important in a lot of media, and to not actively take that away, to put in these ideas that things could happen, and let a fan base latch onto those things. We don't I'm never always upset when if it doesn't come to actual like legitimate fruition, but also don't actively take it away, which I also felt like Zori Bliss was this trying to actively take it
Yes.
away, which
And
also,
it was. She was
yeah,
an Aunt Harriet, just
yeah,
like in the old Batman stuff
yep,
of like where they were like, "Oh, these two men living together. We have to put a woman in there to like
yep,
clarify no homo."
yep,
Zori
but
Bliss
also
is that,
straight
and I
people,
brought that up too.
yeah,
Like I brought that up specifically in that meeting because I was like, it's not that the character is bad or the performance
yep,
is bad. It's just you have queer people identifying with one of these characters. And, Finn was introduced asking if Ray had a boyfriend. So it's like, I don't care if we like confirm that Finn is straight, but to go out of your way
hmm,
with Zori Bliss to really confirm that Poe is straight. And that's what they did,
yep,
because every one of
yep,
those scenes is also, he is the one romantically chasing her.
yep,
She is telling him no every single scene, except for the kind of ambiguous at the end. You know,
yep,
it's designed to confirm that Poe is straight, and that
yep,
was insulting.
yep,
And and the kiss was insulting. Like I have those frustrations too, because I very much, that's why I brought them up
yep,
with these people, because I was
yep,
like, if I have one shot to talk to these people about queerness, I'm gonna bring up how like this stuff is hurtful.
yep,
I didn't need Finn and Poe to get together in Rise of Skywalker, but after those Zori Bliss scenes, because like I said, from Force Awakens, I was like, oh well, Finn's straight, who cares? And I was kind of very dismissive of all of that
hmm,
stuff. But then when it came to how Rise of Skywalker was put together, I suddenly became the biggest fan of Storm Pilot there was.
Yep.
During
Hard
lockdown
same.
when
Hard
all we
same.
had was time, like I went and re-edited my own version of the sequel trilogy, and I took out any reference of romance between, Finn and Poe to women.
Yep.
And I did my best to kind of reorient some of their interactions with female characters to be towards each other. Like some of like Finn's or Poe's final moment with Zori, I edited together with a moment with Finn, so that way
Love
it
it.
could be more suggestive for them. Like I did
That's
my best
great.
to do
Yeah.
like, because that's the thing. It's like you suddenly feel like you need to make amends for this thing that is,
Yep.
because even though it's not intended to be, it feels like a betrayal. It feels like someone is deliberately trying to harm you. And when we look at the context in which we live, and it's only gotten worse in the years since Rise of Skywalker, there are people trying to hurt us.
Look how
particularly
well you
trans
crafted
people.
that without coming right out and saying anything right around. But I'm with you. I think until the Rise of Skywalker, I was so excited to have Poe be bi. So their little whole thing of putting Zori there also didn't erase queerness, because Poe just
Oh
reads
no,
bi
yeah.
energy anyways. And I
Sure, but
was
the scenes are designed that way.
Oh no,
I think yes, we
100%.
can retcon with publishing, and if Oscar Isaac ever returns to the franchise, yes, we can put queerness
Yep.
there. We can make him bisexual. We can help retcon those scenes that people were already picking up that queerness. But the scenes with Zori Bliss are designed
Yes.
to say he's straight.
100%.
Not designed to be like, oh, he could be bi. They are
Nope.
very specifically, and because that's where it's like, I don't want to be saying any bi erasure. It's not that,
Yep.
it's just the way the scenes are structured, because it's also trying to create a contrast to his scenes with Finn. It's trying to recontextualize his scenes with Finn to be platonic and show, oh, if Poe was romantically interested, this is how he'd act, and look how different that is.
Yep.
And that's what made that so frustrating.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I want to circle back to something you were saying too. I think I wish this is my not popular for Twitter question. I wish us gays, and I'm just going to keep it to gays, would also allow straight people to tell queer stories, because I do think it's important. Queerness is greater than just ourselves, and it has an effect on society at large. There are parents with queer children that might still be straight identifying that have an opinion and a thought on queerness. And I also think that outside of just being queer is also an important perspective to get. I also think on that flip side, I think it's important that we can let queer people tell stories that are not queer specific stories, because we also have a unique vision of the world, and our queer lens, we look at everything that way. And I think there's interesting stories, and I think it's interesting to hold space for that it doesn't always feel we allow people to do, and that is also frustrating. And I think it also makes people who are not queer afraid to tell a queer story, because they are so afraid
and
to
that
mess
cuts
it up.
down our representation on a whole other level. I very much agree with that. And I think there's also another factor that we keep seeing it reel its ugly head in a slightly different space. But some people who currently present or identify as cisgender and heterosexual are exploring the fact that they might not be when they try telling queer stories. And so we see a lot of these situations where people are having to out themselves because they're getting called out on Twitter and whatever. That happened with the author of Love, Simon. She has now come out as bisexual, I believe. And one of the, I think it would be classified as a sequel. It focuses on the friend that Catherine Langford plays. It is all about that character exploring her bisexuality. And we have all these examples. And like when people want to say that celebrities are queer baiting, it's like, you can't queer bait your life.
Yep.
Like, okay, if you think some fashion is queer, like part of why we are trying to normalize pronouns, why we're trying to, you know, talk about non-binary people and get rid of this like sense of everything needing to be male or female so that non-binary people can exist and can flourish. Part of that is also saying, okay, if a straight person wants to explore fashion in a way that isn't codified to, even if they still identify as cisgender, why should they be bound by that binary? If we as queer people are trying to say these binaries are harmful constructs that we should get rid of, it's like, well, then let's get rid of them. Let Harry Styles dress however the fuck he wants. Oh, sorry, I probably shouldn't have said. Or whichever, celebrity is doing whatever. And it's like, we gotta stop treating real people as products. It is different when you have a show like Supernatural that did queerbait. We know that is a very textbook example. We have several of those across our media landscape where the hint of queerness is deliberately all we're going to get, and it's done to sell a product. People aren't products.
Mm-hmm.
If Harry Styles, just to use an easy example,
Yeah.
is doing things in such a way that will identify with queer audiences to sell his music, which is a product, that's still not queer baiting, because guess what? Those queer listeners, if it's working,
Yep.
are identifying to his music naturally and with what's there. He's never promised that he is or isn't or whatever. And also, it's none of our business what he is and isn't.
Yep.
All of this kind of speculation and policing of queer expression, all it does is keep some people in the closet.
Yep.
And make coming out a more dangerous experience. And to bring that back to film and television, things aren't as perfect and easy for people to be out as you would think. There can still be consequences, particularly for actors and for people in other disciplines and stuff as well. Like, it's not always easy. And sometimes you have to be like, I try to make a point to kind of find a way to mention early on, I like usually in an interview process or something, of like that I am, gay, because I don't want to have to play the game later on. Like, if that's an issue, just don't give me the job and let's move on. And it hasn't been an issue for me personally, but I've been incredibly lucky in that, and part of that was like, it wasn't an issue to be gay getting hired onto a Ryan Murphy show. Like, that's incredibly lucky, but that isn't going to necessarily be the same for everyone at every studio. I do know that some of the executives at Disney are some that are much more apprehensive to queer things on screen. That's where as Disney does all of the pride stuff with Star Wars, there are 2 characters that were at a convention confirmed to be gay that are always noticeably absent. And a big part of that is because they were confirmed to be gay at a convention rather than being approved by that whole Disney process. And so that's where it's like, it'll be a long while, I feel like, before Disney ever confirms Orca and Flix from Resistance are gay. And a big part of that is, everyone thinks of Hollywood as being so liberal, so liberal, so liberal. And it's, yes, for the artists, for the workers, for the people in the grind, absolutely. For the executives making a lot of money, running corporations, they're not. And whatever they allow to happen that seems liberal, it is done as a marketing tool because, as we've discussed, things that are representative of our life experience, we will purchase into. That is not a liberal agenda being pushed. That is just basic economics of like, oh, if we, the rainbow capitalism of it all, which during Pride Month and like I love rainbow capitalism. I'll go buy whatever. I've been looking around. It's like, where can I find the, Gap had a Keith Haring shirt, and I was like, oh, it's sold out before I found it.
Yep.
And it was like, it looked good and stuff, and I was like, I'm all about it. But that isn't liberal in and of itself.
Nope.
And so you do have people who believe like queerness shouldn't be for kids. You do have people who believe these things and are in positions of power who can, block it. And so, yeah, I think beyond that convention reveal, which created a lot of controversy and tumultuousness with Orca and Flix, I don't think they will ever be officially confirmed as queer. Which sucks. But if anyone's ever wondering why, like, that's why. It's a corporation who has a lot of conservative people at the top.
Yep.
And, again, there are just so many people involved in everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do think, we end up every year talking about rainbow capitalism. And again, like, I'm not joking. And this is, we're just a little podcast in a big pond, right? But like our numbers double every single June. Every June. Some people might take a lot of offense to that. Maybe this is my age speaking, and I've said this before, but there was a time when I was in my 20s that like being gay was so absolutely horrible. There was no such thing as rainbow capitalism. Like, it was so hated that it wasn't even there. And there was a part of me that I'm like, hey, at least I'm valued in some way. Like, it's not perfect, but like, at least it's being talked about. And
yeah,
that conversation, and I think those things happening, Disney selling an S ton of like Pride merch, eventually is going to make those people at the top soften to the idea of the whole thing, like, over time, hopefully. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, and that it is multifaceted. Like, I have 3 examples, and I'll work back closer to more relevant as I go. But I remember working at Andrew Christian, and it's a brand, for anyone who doesn't know, largely associated with Twinks, with Trophy Boys. They even have a line called Trophy Boy. And just kind of, and often also sex workers, between people stripping, or they've done a lot of deals for models who are pornography performers, or it also have done sponsorships to where when clothes are being stripped off in porn, that it's Andrew Christian underwear that's getting stripped off.
Yep.
And it has a fairly negative reputation, especially with people with diverse body shapes and things like that. And one thing I realized working there is a lot of that negative reception and perception is largely from large cities with other queer brands and with other queer spaces, whereas their popularity skyrockets in places where there isn't a lot of public queerness around, like in the Midwest, where it's like you don't have a gay store or a gay bar for several miles. That's where it's so popular. And there's a difference between being someone in a space where you can be outwardly queer and you can be vocal about what you want and what is representative to you, and then someone being in a space that is not, and having to do the best you can with what you got, and trying to find some connection to those larger queer spaces and queer products and queer things. And that's where I think a lot of this rainbow capitalism has value. Is we gotta sometimes, like, okay, yes, our big metropolitan cities and our Twitter spaces, like, yes, we have safe queer spaces and products that are better. But because Andrew Christian so permeates these other spaces, it's a well-known brand for someone who's out in the middle of nowhere who can't express their queerness safely through other means, can
Yep.
in a really small way and maybe a silly way, uh, but that has value, and it does help change things.
Yep.
For as poorly as I think Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch handled Dylan Mulvaney, that the reason why it was such an uproar is because normalizing a queer person, a trans woman, just drinking a. This is the other funny thing about the whole Bud Light thing is Bud Light is
Yeah.
so disgusting. But just normalizing them drinking a beer had an uproar because, conservative people, um, people in high funk or high control religious spaces, they don't want it to be normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have textbook bans. That's why we have all of this craziness going on, bans on healthcare and things like that. They want to make it abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
But rainbow capitalism, that's its strength. And
Yep.
no, I don't think it's this liberal thing. It's not.
Nope.
it's just trying to sell more product, but that has value.
Yep.
And then before I completely lose track, what was the last thing I was going to say on that? Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
With watching different shows, and I rewatch a lot of queer shows and movies and things like that, I've realized that there's something that is insanely important for like more younger generations and newer people to coming out. That's so valuable for them
Mm-hmm.
that I struggle with more and more. And some of that is it's. I love that it's being mocked in the first couple episodes of the other two's newest season, but that kind of twee young queer story.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking Love Simon,
Yep.
Heartstopper, and even to a degree Schitt's Creek, where you have these beautifully tender coming out stories where everything goes right, and that seems so lovely. But it is not my life experience, and there is a degree where it starts to become, for me personally, like as an individual, a little annoying. Like I don't like those scenes anymore.
Yep.
Because that is so antithetical to my experience. Um, and it's difficult to watch those, but they have value.
Mm-hmm.
It like I won't lie, it's cathartic watching some of them sometimes,
Yep.
but it's also infuriating at other times because I do think there has become those stories are important to queer people, and I think the way Love Simon handled it with specifically how afraid he was to come out, despite knowing coming out would go over fine with his friends and family. I think that story is important for straight people to see. But these other stories, I hate that straight people see them. I do not like that straight people see, like, oh, see, everything's fine. No one has a problem with gay people anymore. You have gay marriage, it's all fine. And it creates a complacency that
Yep.
allows all that's been happening over the past couple of years to happen. Last year when Roe v. Wade was overturned, we had a Supreme Court justice literally say, I want to overturn Obergefell, which is gay marriage, and also Loving, which is interracial marriage, for any non-queer people who showed up here and got through this
Yeah.
far in. But they also said Lawrence v. Texas, which is what decriminalized homosexuality across the country. Like, if that does get overturned, like they said they want to, I think there's still 13 states where it would immediately become illegal to be gay
Mm-hmm.
overnight. And I don't think people are taking that seriously. And they're not looking around at the transphobic panic and gender critical movement or TERFs or whatever we want to call them. but they're not taking it seriously because they're like, oh, but like, it's all from a reasonable place. It's like, no drag show is sexualizing your children. I'm sorry. It's just not happening. It's and no one can ever come up with an example because it's not about reality. It's about fear
Yep.
mongering. And, I mean, that's part of where, my partner and I have been together several years, but it's like the ceremony of marriage and the like tradition of it all wasn't as important to us. But then as we were like looking
Mm,
at like logistics of, for financial things and for, also realistically, if we ever do need to leave the country, like it will be a lot easier if we are married, and we may not have an opportunity to do that for too much longer. Um, that was part of what kind of instigated the like, well, maybe we should
yep.
start talking about this a little bit more seriously,
Oh,
because before then it was like, oh, it's just a piece of paper. What's the difference? We're together. We know we love each other.
you
Who
know,
cares? But that started to change things.
I appreciate you bringing this up. And I know we're running a little long, but I think this is such an important conversation because, at least the way I look at it, like, I always wonder if there isn't some sort of embedded inner homophobia attached to some of these things about marriage. Like, we pretend like it doesn't matter. And because I can speak to that 100%. My husband and I have been we're almost at 16 years together. And we didn't get
Congratulations.
married.
That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you. We didn't get married for a very long time because I mean, everything I say is half jokes anyways. But it's like, I didn't want to run out and get married the day that it became legal because I didn't want to have the same wedding date as everybody else. But I also understood politically it was a really big statement. And we had already had everything set up that as best as we could, right? But then we we were being certified to adopt, and then our first child moved in with us, and all of a sudden it became about the practicality of the thing. And I joked that we were married within under 4 minutes. We were in and out of this place, and it didn't matter anything to me. And I can't help but wonder if there's something like I didn't need it anymore because it was honestly, I'm going to be 44 here soon. Like, there was a big chunk of my life that I just didn't think it was ever going to happen.
Yeah.
And I just kind of accepted that. I fought for it all the time, but I was always felt like I was not fighting for me. I was fighting for who was coming after me because I wasn't going to get it.
Yeah.
And then it happened, and both Tom and I were like, I don't know if this matters that much to us, but now it's about like we want to make sure that as we adopt our children, we all have the same last name for legal purposes. And like
Yeah.
when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it's really scary. It is so scary to live this idea that what if it's taken away? Like, and for me, I can only speak for myself, and for Tom, like, well, who cares for us? But what does that mean for our kids? Like, literally, what would happen? There are so many things that we got married to tie that all together that now what if it becomes undone? What happens? And when people roll their eyes or blow it off that it doesn't matter, I'm like, well, you're really lucky that it doesn't need to matter to you.
Well, and not only that, but I think it's also very naive because if we want to go back, what, 90 years?
Mm-hmm.
The most queer affirming place, I almost want to say in the world, but specifically in the West, was Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, it was the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then very similar strategies brought very similarly aligned political people into power.
Yep.
And the first book burning by the Nazis was a queer library and research center that performed trans affirming healthcare. And like the amount of knowledge and research that we lost in that time, uh, it's it's heartbreaking and astounding. But we are in a similar moment. Like it is a very Like, I very much hope that these things don't happen.
Yep.
But it's hard not to say, okay, well, there is a pattern happening throughout Europe, throughout the United States, um, a little bit in Canada, a little bit in Australia, but of a nationalist movement that is largely white nationalist, and
Mm-hmm.
it's gaining traction in ways that is shocking and hopefully on the downfall. And because no one should want that,
Yep.
it's easy for some to think, oh, well, if I align with them, I'll be the exception. And, whether you want to say that about the LGB without the T crowd, or
Mm-hmm.
conservative women, or conservative people of color, it's not true. It's not going to go that way.
Yep.
Again, we have precedent. We know what happened the last time a movement like this really got traction. The people who burned down the Hirschfield Center was the SA, a group that predated the SS.
Yep.
And they were led by a gay man. And part of how Hitler was able to um, excuse murdering them all in the Night of the Long Knives, a very famous, actually
Mm-hmm.
took place over like 3 days, but he like murdered all of them. He had them all killed, and he was able to excuse it by saying, well, they were gay. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the reality was they are the ones who got him that power. They were the first military group that he was able to use, and he feared that they would turn on him.
Yep.
But the homophobia and transphobia, it all is tied together.
Yep.
It's across the board.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, and it's like, and that's where it's like we're already seeing the anti-woke laws in Florida are now being used to get rid of Holocaust education, and it's only going to get worse unless we like collectively do something about it.
Yep. I think I agree. I think I don't know. I mean, I say this all the time, but like from my experience, I feel like I'm in 1998 all over again. And I didn't think I I think maybe I love my friend Chase so much, and Chase is not young, but they are still in their 20s, and I know you know they're dealing. They had their panel this year, Star Wars Celebration, the drag panel that
Yeah,
caused way too much trash, and we would speak a lot about it, off offline or whatever, and I feel like I was so heartbroken for them because I feel like I've become numb to it because I grew up in that environment. I'm hardened to it, and I'm trained at emotionally combating it. I don't know if it's healthy training or not, but I but I'm trained at it.
yeah.
And this was really their first brush with something that big. And
Well,
it
yeah,
was
and
awful. It was so
and
awful.
it sucks because I think if it was a different queer expression, it may not have been the same degree. But yeah, drag performers and trans people um, are right now a target,
Hmm.
and it's it's so heartbreaking for so many reasons. And I think it's also difficult that so much expectation is for the people of those communities to be the ones talking about it and to be the
Yep.
ones in the biggest part of that fight. And I know for at least me, I have a very conservative Christian family and upbringing.
Yeah.
I was closeted until I was 26.
Mm.
I'm 32 now, so that was
Yeah.
like early 2017.
Yeah.
Um, and it's still like I still remember so many little things that made queerness so scary for me growing up. Like, I absolutely remember the Matthew Shepard situation.
Hmm.
And I also remember that like no one around me would talk about it. It's like you
Hmm.
hear some of the grisly details of like the man who found him uh, thought he was a Halloween decoration at first, like just a really gruesome Halloween decoration. Like that's the level of, and I've never seen. I don't think they've ever released images of what happened to him. But it's like you hear these horrifying things, and I was like 6 or 7 at the time,
Mhm.
and it's like, and then no one talks about it, and no, everyone's just fine with it.
Yep.
You'll have your parents pull you over on the side of the road to tell you like about the Monica Lewinsky situation and how like, if a man's wife can't trust you, no one can trust you. And then they vote
Yep.
for Donald Trump, however many years later. And I remember like there were just other random things. I remember my dad one time, who he's liberal and he's queer affirming, and so it's like this is one of those like things of where he didn't mean it the way that it came out. But
Mhm.
I remember we were just watching a movie. This is like I don't know, like I was an adult by this time, like in my
Yeah.
early 20s. And he like pauses it and he turns to me and he was like, when you were little, we always thought you were gay because it was so easy to hurt your feelings. And I was like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? What does that have to do with the Princess Bride? Like,
Yep.
you just have all these weird things that codify, intentional or other. Again, I've later found out like this was him trying to open up for me, but it's like that was not helpful.
Yep.
But it's like there's so many things that yes do create that harmful environment, and while I'm so excited for the younger generation who can grow up with a lot of that baggage just not there. This is again kind of where I was talking about with some of this media of like we do still need some media that talks about the way things were. We do
Mhm.
need some things to still kind of, or even just bring back the media that already exists, because there is a lot out there, but it's really hard to get.
Yep.
There's a movie that, and this is gonna be my third time saying the word, so I apologize if you have to like bleep this out or something. But there's a movie called Totally Fucked Up by Greg
Yeah.
Araki, and it was released on DVD like once 20 years ago. And to get a copy of it, I had to like spend $80 for
Yep.
this shitty DVD from 20 years ago.
Yep.
And I think a lot of his movies are now being remastered and re-released. They just did the Doom Generation director's cut, put it back in theaters, and that'll hopefully be on a disc soonish. I don't
Yeah.
know. I hope so. Um, but it's like we need that stuff. We need, as queer people, to really look at our own queer history and the queer expression. I think the way that there have been films released on disc, a lot from Altered Innocence and Vinegar Syndrome, and AGFA has even put out some that are putting these old films from like the early 70s and stuff even um, out there that we really should, as queer people, look at for a history of queer media, and to understand
Mhm.
like the relationship of like, yes, pornography has always been a part of queer media. And if you look at those older films, you'll see like the reason why they had a story and were also pornographic is because a lot of these filmmakers couldn't get funding unless they couldn't get funding for just a queer story. They couldn't get funding for just queer porn, but if it
Yep.
was both, they could just get enough to scrape by. And that's an important part of our history,
Yep.
knowing like how like queer coding, that word means something from the Hays Code. It's important to look at the pre-code movies and how queer they were, how unabashedly and openly queer they were, and then how it shut down and how we coded characters. It, it's all so important. The first Academy Award winning film
Mhm.
was it was right at the cusp of the code starting to be implemented, but the story is about two soldiers who are competing for the affection of a third character, a woman. But and it's a World War One film. It's amazing technically as well. I mean, but it is like a 2.5 hour silent film, so it might be a struggle to watch for some modern audiences. And yes, it's also in black and white. It's called Wings, but it does feature the first on-screen male-male kiss. And it's from like 1928. We're almost at a century ago. But because from, the early 30s onward, until it was, I think, like it was strictly enforced from like 32, 33 to 68 is when the code was abolished. And but it's important to have all of that and to really know how we tell stories. And sorry, I feel like I'm
No, I love
struggling
this.
a little bit, but and
That's
then
great.
also too, like we were talking about earlier, like give some grace for films that aren't perfect.
Yep.
One of the first big queer movies to be released across the country was based on a wildly successful and acclaimed stage play from 2 years before. And it was called The Boys in the Band. It was remade a couple years ago by Ryan Murphy. And it's fascinating to look at, like, the play was written and released in 68, right? And it was acclaimed for being so accurately representative, particularly of, um, upper middle class gay men in New York City. And then by the time the film comes out, it's 1970, and we're now after Stonewall. And that's no longer the image
Yep.
we want to show as queer people. But I think it's still also important to look at, again, from a historical perspective. Same thing happened with the
Yep.
same straight director 10 years later with Cruising, where it was like telling something loosely based on a true story. Cruising is a great movie about internalized homophobia and ambiguity and all this stuff, but it was so focused on the leather community and the BDSM community, and also was a slasher with gay men being killed right and left. It was, you know,
Yep.
hailed as what we'd now call problematic. And, it was so boycott at the time by people who were like, this isn't the image we want to send out into the world, that they had to like replace almost all the dialogue from the film because there were just people shouting outside filming the entire film. But yeah, we got to keep a big connection to all of it. And
I mean, a lot of it is lost, and
oh yeah, especially
people.
the silent era. Almost the
Yep.
entire silent era is lost.
And the '80s, we lost a lot of people that were the
Oh yeah.
harbingers of such history.
One
I
of the
just,
most heartbreaking films I've seen is it's called Buddies. It was the first film to depict AIDS, and I had the realization like midway through watching it of like, oh, this isn't makeup in the film, and that was really hard to come to that realization mid film of just like, oh, like knowing that the cast members, the director were all dying of AIDS while
yep,
making this film that's a very beautiful portrait of that time period, and I think still maybe stronger than some of the films that have been made since.
yep.
Um, yeah, sorry.
No, I think, I mean, all this stuff is just so incredibly important, and film, television, stories. This is why they're important. This is how a lot of people learn their history that isn't going to be taught in school. And honestly, I have zero hope that queerness is ever going to be taught in school, because queerness is so much entwined with sex. I don't,
It is and it isn't though,
I
because like,
don't, yeah.
yeah, it's a tough one. I think there is a way to have a conversation about it that's appropriate. I think.
Oh, I don't mean like I personally think it's that way, but the way that like
No, yeah.
society puts it is like this really complicated mess, and
Well, and I
I
think a
just
big
don't
part
see
of that is
society
also
changing.
I do.
Unfortunately, I hope good, good.
And I largely again would compare that to other marginalized groups,
Mm,
particularly with race. Like when you think about the way that race was taught before and after the 60s, and all of the stereotypes that were still so prevalent, and the dehumanizing aspect of all of that. And yeah, once you dismantle that stuff and you start actually talking about it in a much more factual way, and it's like
mm.
also the sexuality aspect, we have puberty conversations in schools, like starting in late elementary, I want to say, like what, fifth grade, fourth grade, somewhere in there.
We
And it's
don't have
like,
them here anymore. That
Oh,
doesn't
well.
exist in school. Just
But that's the
pretty.
thing, though, is it's like, and we need those conversations for the same
Mhm.
reason that like young women and young men who have maybe not transitioned yet need to learn about, menstruation. Like
Yep.
that's important. Like I can't imagine how terrifying it would be for uh, someone to start menstruating and have no idea what it is.
Yep.
You know, I from growing up in very conservative Christian spaces, like I've known women who had the sex talk from their parents on their wedding day. And it's horrifying. It's
Yep.
okay to hear some of these things from a very neutral and just like, you know what? Everyone's attracted. You've had a crush before, right? This is kind of what it is, where it comes from. You might have a crush this way, you might have a crush that way.
Yep.
It's fine. Like it's
Honestly, this is why to rainbow capitalism almost is important, because there are so many people who grow up in those kinds of
yeah.
societies and cultures and in those families that buying a shirt at a Walmart might be your only way to get it. Maybe it's buying that pair of problematic Andrew Christensen underwear, but you get to feel that way.
Yeah.
Like, and I agree, like you mentioned this earlier, there is this policing going on again of in online spaces specifically, because of this is how queer you need to be and you need to show it this way, and then comes the onslaught of guilt laid on you if you don't, because look at all of these other people. Again,
Mhm.
I can only speak from my experience, but like I know my little I get so much nastiness, not just
I
from
can't
straight
imagine.
people, not just from the straight people saying I'm
Oh
too
no, I
gay
know.
and how is this, but also from a whole ton of queer people of like, I'm not gay enough and I sell out and I don't do this or I don't do that. And, it's just like,
We could have a full on conversation, and if you ever want to, I'd be open to
yeah,
it. But like of the way that a lot of people in these queer communities do reject media that isn't perfect or
mhm,
isn't representative to them specifically. Like even my, like I said, I have sometimes a instinctual like knee jerk reaction. I know other people do too, to like the things like Heartstopper or whatever. Even though I do like the
yep,
show and I've watched the show multiple times, but like I also know people who, looking comes back into the Twitter discourse every now and again, and it's
yep,
like, oh, but it wasn't perfect in this way or that way, and whatever, and it wasn't this, it wasn't that, and it wasn't. It's like, okay, but it was something, and I'm not saying it has to be your cup of tea,
yep,
but again, with the capitalism of it all, with these companies, it's like, yeah, by letting movies like Strange World and Bros fail, while that may not be the queer movie you want to see, it is also telling studios that you don't want to see other queer movies.
mhm,
And it sucks to have a conversation that shallow and that blunt, but that's how capitalism works. And
mhm,
the fact is, with film and television, it is not just art, it is also commerce. And that's part of what makes, when you have a brilliantly artistic film succeed and get seen by so many people, that's part of the magic. Is it's like, oh, this was able to overcome the worst obstacles and still be something so special.
yep,
And I would say that about Everything Everywhere All at Once last year, or yeah, I still feel that way about Last Jedi, even though it's not on necessarily queer terms, but like that film is very artistic to me in ways that it's, when you think about the way that most blockbusters are made, it's insane that The Last Jedi was able to be made. It took
mhm,
some big swings, and yeah, it upset a lot of people, but I am so tired of safe media, I think. Um, like I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired of like, we have people online like wanting the Hays Code back, and I'm like, why? It was
yep,
awful to all of us.
yep,
And it was so boring. Like, I don't know. I want weird stuff. Your last question for me is like, what do I want to see from the future of Star
yep,
Wars? And I want weird. I want things that I've never thought about before. I want things that go off in different directions.
Yep.
When I think about what was exciting about Star Wars Legends, the old EU, like the things that excite me most are not the things that everyone else is excited about. Like, yes, Thrawn is great, Mara Jade is fun. I love the weird stuff where um, just looking for an easy example, like Jackson. Jackson shouldn't work. He's a Bugs Bunny ripoff who's green in space doing the Duck Dodgers thing, but then interacting with like Luke and Leia. It's weird. It doesn't always work. One of my easiest examples to throw at people who are like, oh, we should have kept the old EU is there was this book series when I was in elementary. I forgot what the overarching title was, but it was all about there was a tricloptic imperial officer
Yeah. Oh God.
who squeezed a fruit while wearing the glove of Darth Vader so that he could get force lightning powers to help him hunt down the royal prince of the Jedi, and then who gets under the protection of Luke, who is being hunted down by Jabba the Hutt's mom for revenge. These books are terrible, but they sparked my imagination in a way that so little of newer franchises or spin-off material or ancillary media has. Like, because it was just so weird. It was different, and it was just so deliberately going against what you might expect otherwise. And no, I haven't reread those books. I would be terrified to. I don't think they will hold up.
I want to remember them as being great books.
Well, no, I don't even remember them as being great, but I
Yeah.
remember them being as they sparked my imagination, which is what you want for early elementary, like 6, 5, however old I was. Like, that has value. I think we've gotten such an aversion for, especially in kids media, for like things that are scary. Like, kids media used to be scary. I remember an annoyance I had working on the Bad Batch was, here in Clone Wars, they're allowed to use lasers, but in the Bad Batch, they use stunners. And, I think maybe towards the end of season 2, they started to change that up a little bit more. And it was, part of my frustration was like, all the Gen Xers who are making these decisions and being like, oh, well, we got to take care of, can't make things too scary for the kids. They're killing people. It's like, well, they all grew up on we have to use lasers instead of bullets generation. And it's like, okay, but like, at what point is the stunners too much? Because like, oh, he got stunned and then like fell. It's like, okay, but yeah, this is a fantasy story. None of it's real. Do you not see these people's cheekbones? Like, it's not real. Christopher Lee's head is not 2 feet tall.
And that's hold on one second. We have to get back to that. One sec. I hear a child. One moment. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
I'm single daddying it right now, and I heard a fight over a remote control, and I didn't want it to get on here. Speaking of Darth Sidious's, or not Darth Sidious, Darth Tyrannus, Count Dooku's 2-foot head. I think the future of Star Wars needs to go back to the weird and unexpected. I oftentimes think about, I love The Last Jedi. I don't know if I love The Last Jedi being the middle chapter of what became the sequel trilogy. I think it would have been amazing if that was the first one.
Yeah.
because I love that it just completely challenged us, just like the prequels
Well,
challenged us as Star Wars fans.
it and the Mandoverse are both different um, variations on closer to what George was hoping to do with the sequel trilogy, which is
Yep.
really interesting in its own way.
Yep.
Of yeah. So but it also is very much challenging expectations,
Yep.
throwing out the rule book. I think that's what's important is more queer characters, and
Yep.
then also do something weird like remember in the Star Wars, the one part of the Star Wars holiday special that everyone can watch, the Boba Fett,
Mhm.
the what is it, Wookiee, Faithful Wookiee or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
they call that cartoon now. But like they're it's like a liquid, but it's like a gelatinous pink liquid on the surface of the planet. Like more of that, more
Mhm.
you know. Yeah, Boba Fett rode a Rancor, but that's not as cool as riding a dinosaur through whatever that pink goo
Pink goose.
was.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like
I think in order to get that stuff, Star Wars fans are gonna have to just cool it a bit with
yeah.
like.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it really needs to be something that is off the beaten path, but it's like get back to that sense of wonder. Get back to
Mhm.
we shouldn't want things that are realistic. I think that has become I think at one point in time it was a valuable commodity, but we have to get back to wanting things that are just imaginative and
Yep.
creative and like you know we see in old like sci-fi art from the mid-century of like where planets are only 10 feet away from each other,
Yep.
like we got to get back to the weird and the impossible to really let our imaginations go out. Star Wars is not science fiction. It is not meant
Nope.
to explore scientific concepts and how they can impact our actual real society. It is fantasy. It is
Mhm.
supposed to be fantasy. It
Mhm.
is, it is wizards and, it is monsters and it is magic. It is not, and that's the big difference with Star Trek. Star Trek is science fiction.
Yep.
It, and they're very different genres, and that's why they are so different to each other.
Mhm.
You know, I would say Dune sits in between a little bit more because Dune is a lot more about the mechanics of how this society functions under these circumstances. But that's not what Star Wars is, and that's not what Star Wars is supposed to be.
Yep.
It's supposed to be much more about you're in a crazy situation. How do you interact with the world? Like it's much more about the internal journey than the external.
Yep.
Science fiction is more about the external, exploring concepts on a very almost like removed point of view.
Yep.
And that goes all the way back to Frankenstein, and you can argue maybe it goes back further to some of the mythological stories and stuff, but I think the format for the genre really is Frankenstein is science fiction, and then Star Wars plays out like fantasy, like mythology, like King Arthur, and
Yep.
it's let it be weird.
Yep.
It's trying to make things realistic. I feel like has always been the thing that hurts Star Wars. Like worrying about like, oh, well, gravity wouldn't work that way. Well, like sound doesn't travel in space either.
Yeah.
Fire can't exist in a vacuum either. So like those Death Star explosions, like
Yep.
it's not supposed to be that way. It's much more about what it symbolically means than literally means. And
Yep.
that should always be the drive, and even with Andor, which is arguably the most realistic Star Wars, it's still about what things symbolically mean. And it's
Mhm.
very rooted to that, mythological way of telling a story, even though it's so speaking to our current socio-political context.
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes Andor so exciting to me. Much more so, like I love Rogue One as a Ragnarok style, fighting the good fight, even though you're going to lose,
Yep.
and that sacrifice and stuff. And while I don't necessarily think there's a better version of the movie out there, I would be so curious to see some of the other things, to
Mhm.
like see them trying to get the plans off by like trying to get them to a ship, because that was one of the earlier concepts, was like they were running out of the tower and across the beach. And I think that story has a lot of fun and intrigue to it. I sadly think the biggest problem with the film is that Jin should not be the protagonist. She's a very passive protagonist.
Yep.
She's reacting to the story around her rather than, Cassian is the active protagonist of that story, but he's not allowed to be the main character.
Yep.
And it's not about gender, because like, really, make Cassian a woman, I don't care.
Yep.
But it's like the lack of active protagonist is what hurts that movie a little bit for me, even though I think it's one of the most visually stunning we have. And again, I love the themes in that film. But just I want crazy, different, new things that don't follow the pre-established rules. I would love more exploration of like Force things that are not Jedi, not Sith. And I think the only binary of the Force, I think we should always go back to, it's not about like what powers are light side or dark side, because it shouldn't function like a tabletop game. It's you know what I mean? Like, it shouldn't
100%.
be that. It should be, George explained it as, the light side is selfless and the dark side is selfish. And, some people are like, oh, well, you can still have grayness between that. And it's like, not really. If you're doing something for yourself and like it incidentally helps others as well, that is still selfish. And the nature of some of these powers and abilities are going to be more inclined to be selfish in nature or selfless in nature. And I think that's really the only primary rule with the Force that should ever be followed. Everything else, get weird, do crazy things. And just make it fun.
I agree. I think,
but also like tell a good story. Like a 3-act film structure is not the worst idea on the planet. It's much better than a new story every 5 minutes as we search for MacGuffin to MacGuffin to MacGuffin.
Woo! You're like having that little painting nail emoji.
Sorry.
I love it. I think I love that. Star Wars is just so much about reacting. I mean, the creator is a anti-authoritarian 60s child, and so much of Star Wars is to how to rebel against the society and culture around you, also meanwhile being a good person at the end of all of those things. And I love when Star Wars gets into a tabletop game, but in the fandom. I don't want to see it.
Games.
I don't want to see that in a movie.
Want the narratives to function that
way.
100
exactly. Like, leave the narratives simple enough so we can put all of that stuff in there ourselves. Like, I think so much of my favorite Star Wars is to like have a skeleton underneath a helmet. Let your audience put the meat on the bones ourselves, and that is like, for me, that is something that I feel has been missing in Star Wars talk, if that makes sense. And I think for, like, there is no, and this goes back to like what we were saying earlier, like, let writers tell stories that they want to tell. They might fumble here or there, but there's sometimes beauty and lessons learned in the fumbleness of it all. And that is also history being made, and that's how progress happens and all of that stuff. And enjoy the conversation.
Because and this is where, like, earlier talking about reshoots, like, part of why reshoots exist is because something can work beautifully on the page and not work when you see it in person, and like like physically. Like, an easy example is Twilight, and I've got to go here soon, but Twilight, in the novel, when you read the way she describes Edward, like, sparkling or whatever it is, like, there is like it lulls you in and it's like, okay, I get it. But then you like see it with your eyes and you're like, what's happening? And that's not to diminish either one. I think, like, to me, the first Twilight film is a fascinating exploration of like a literalist adaptation is maybe not the best.
Yep.
And I was watching the documentary about Howard Ashman, because the Little Mermaid coming out and all that stuff. And one of the things that he said, he was talking about adapting material for the stage and then also from the stage to film. And he came up with my favorite definition of adaptation. And he was like, it's like telling a friend about something that you love and all the things you loved about it. It's not worrying about getting all the things perfect and all the whatever. It's just about focusing on those core elements that spoke to you.
Yep.
And that's why I think, things can be put on stage multiple times. I think that's why remakes do have value. And not speaking to any specific remakes, but just like in general. But yeah, I think that should be the bigger focus of as more people, and any sequel, spin-off, whatever with Star Wars is an adaptation of that core idea from the original trilogy. The sequels always get put as adapted screenplay because that's what they are. They're adapting the first idea into something new. And I think that should go back to being the focus of how we making these things and as fans interact with it, of like, this what speaks to this person about it. And if something doesn't work for you or for them or whatever, that's okay.
Yep.
But we gotta remember that there are people on both sides of this. If you were to count the names in the credits, and then remember there are contracts that require certain credits to be in the film or the show, and that oftentimes there are several more people who are not credited because they weren't contracted to be. Especially with TV, a lot of people aren't don't have to be credited in TV, and it's just like, there's just so many.
Yeah, I agree. I'm here for it. Thank you very, very, very much. I appreciate it. This is a great conversation. Way more in depth of how things work than I think we've ever gotten. So that's exciting. That's very, very, very exciting. All right, my friend, where can people find you if you want them to find you?
I don't have a lot going on social media right now. I do have a Twitter, and it's just my name, but without the space between them. I think I went on private so that I would comment on bigoted posts less and just block them. But if you request a follow and like stuff, I might let you follow and follow you back and whatever. I definitely like talking about all the fandom stuff online.
Yep. You and I have some fun conversations. The old internet, the old social media. All right. Well, until next time, hopefully you'll come back and we can we need to talk about The Last Jedi together.
Oh yeah. I have so many opinions about the sequel trilogy in good ways and in bad ways and all of it.
Love it. I'm here for it. My relationship with the sequel trilogy is an interesting relationship, and I think so many of us do. So I think there's so much perspective to gain from that. So
well,
until next time.
I think I'm the only one who thinks, and I'll end on this, Force Awakens is my least favorite of all the Star Wars films. And I think I might be alone in that, but yeah.
I like it.
So as a tease, if we ever want to come back to that topic.
And I'm back. Thank you, Jake. That was such a wonderful conversation. It was so lovely speaking to another creative professional, although your creative profession, I think, is a whole lot more fun than mine. At least as of right now. Who knows where the future will go. But it was also really great to speak to someone about representation and rainbow capitalism in the same way that I do. Because there's not always a lot of me out there. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. Hopefully you understood where we were coming from. Let's have a dialogue, people. Let's have a dialogue. I'm so excited for the next 2 episodes. It's another two-parter. This dude right here can talk. And we're going to hang out with my friend Kay Anderson from the podcast Lost Spaces. Check that podcast out to get yourself prepared. I was on that show once. Our old friend Mark, formerly of Pink Milk, was on that show once. So find us, listen to it, get to know Kay. Thank you again, Jake. And until next time, my friends, let's drink up.